All right, Patrick, let's get into the first topic for today's conversation. And that is we are going to be talking about how the Liberals and NDP promised 3.9 million homes by 2031. 3.9 million. Now, this is nice to say, Patrick. It hits the headlines, hits the newspapers, it's on all the TV stations, so on and so forth. 3.9 million homes. We are going to get out of this housing crisis by getting to 3.9 million homes. Now, is this even, are we even close to hitting this? Number one, Patrick, is the first question I have for you. And the second question is, what are the probabilities of success here? Let's talk about it. Let's break down these numbers.
The probabilities of success are zero.
Whoa.
When we look at the numbers, to consider that they're talking about doubling our best year ever, which was like whatever year it was back in the 60s or early 70s or something. I think we had the most. But when we look at the math, you're talking about doubling the best time or the best year ever when interest rates are at record highs, where construction and labor costs are not only high, there's limited amounts that we can do. And I think the math is 1,528 homes a day. I'm just looking at my notes, 64 homes an hour for 7 straight years, including and meaning you would have to also work weekends. So the probability is zero.
I see your point.
It's not looking good for us to hit this, Patrick. And listen, I'm super fired up around this. I have committed the entire Vistor Property Group and Vistor Property Management Organization to try to help this housing crisis. And I tell you, we're getting, it's block after block after block. We're getting stopped at every level. And it's absolutely incredible, the politics that are out there. And I'm sure we'll dig into it. But I think you're right, Patrick, that if you just break down the numbers, 3.9 million homes, and if you break that down, they're just not going to hit the numbers. There's just no way. So this poses a really interesting question, which is, what are we going to do? You got families that can't afford to buy. You got lots of families that can't afford to rent now. And we're going to be looking at supply and demand data in just a little bit, where supply of housing is at an all-time low. And as the supply gets lower and lower, the price goes higher and higher. So this is really not trending in the right direction, is it, Patrick?
It's certainly not. And I want to just qualify something, as we go into this episode, JG, there's just no real good economic news. That's just the truth of what's happening. But having said that, we have to get out of that fray, if you will. We have to look at it through the lens of being investors and say, okay, within this chaos, this confusion, this uncertainty, this frustration with a government that doesn't seem to know what the hell it's doing is opportunity. And so as much as we look at the economic data, we get frustrated by it. You, in fact, are at the effect of it, given the projects that you've got going on, the bureaucracy of what's happening, and the blocks that you run in terms of even getting your units onto market, getting a shovel in the ground, for Christ's sakes. It's really nuts. But my point is, in all of that lies the opportunity to put capital to work, to get it into a hard asset, a store of value called real estate. And I think we need to just stay focused on that. And that's really what we need to do.
So in order to hit the 3.9 million, they actually have to double the best they've ever done before. They have to double. That means 100% plus growth. The best they've ever done, not the average, the best they've ever done. That's what that means. And here's the housing starts as of February 2024. These are the real numbers. This is where it's at. Whereas Canada in general, and that was a Canadian statistic, 3.9 million homes across all of Canada. Right now, we're growing at 5%. 5.3%. In fact, there's many provinces like Quebec, like Ontario, like Manitoba, like Saskatchewan. And by the way, the bulk of Canada's population is in Quebec and Ontario. Both of those are way down. Manitoba's down almost 45%. Same with Saskatchewan. Alberta's doing really well. BC's up 21%. That's actually pretty good for BC. Atlantic Canada is way up, but there's nobody in Atlantic Canada, so you're not really making a dent in the whole overall population here. The fact is that in general, we're really failing at this, Patrick. And these are the kinds of numbers that I think the federal government has to be accountable to. If they're going to say things like we want to hit 3.9 million new homes, they should start publishing this and start tracking this the same way we would as business owners.
Well, I think this is so important to understand. As a sophisticated real estate investors, we look at all the economic data so that we can kind of sort through and get to what the truth is. As we go into an election year, we're going to hear all sorts of kind of stories, if you will, and outright, I'm going to just say it out loud. They're going to just be lying. Let's face it. 3.9 million homes to me is just an outright lie. There's no possible way that they can hit that, yet it will speak well to those who are going, oh, okay, our government's going to save us. No, our government's not going to save us in this housing crisis. They continue to create it, and the same people who create the problem aren't going to fix the problem. So this goes back to, again, we have to sort through all of the clutter and all of these kind of headlines, if you will, that are all meant to ramp up towards an election year.
So here's some more great charts, Patrick, on if you look at the blue bars indicate essentially supply, and the red line indicates the price change. Now, to me, you don't have to be a rocket scientist. You don't have to be an engineer. You don't have to be really smart, because I'm not particularly smart. But you can see how anytime there's a dip in the blue bars, the red bar goes up, right? That means that as supply goes down, the price goes up. And that's exactly what's happening again right now. So even though, yes, interest rates are way higher than they've been, 20-year highs. Patrick, because the supply has come down, that has put a price on the floor. So some people are expecting a big price drop in real estate. This will not happen. Just look at the data. There will not be a massive price drop in real estate because the supply is going down. As a result, the price of real estate is going up, and you can see it right here in this graph.
Well, exactly. And something, JG, it's so important to point this out, because one of the things as investors we look at is going, okay,
where is this all going to go? I've got real estate, or I want to buy real estate. I've got rentals. What is going to happen to rent?
It is really an interesting time, isn't it? Because supply just isn't about building more. It's about what are people doing, and they're not selling. Now, we, of course, have these regional pockets, and we have to make sure that we understand and remember that real estate is regional. But the other part of the supply issue is because of interest rates, people are not selling because they know that in order to buy, they're walking into a much higher mortgage rate. Now, some of this is starting actually to get normalized depending on what province you're in, but ultimately we're seeing the supply continue to trend down because people aren't listing. We're not able to build. Again, you're a perfect example of what developers are bumping up against, which is number one, bureaucracy. Number one, the deal doesn't pencil anymore. The math doesn't work. So supply is going to continue to be an issue regardless of the economic conditions. So to expect a big crash in real estate prices, you'll be sitting on the sidelines a long time, and you're going to miss some big opportunities.
And that right there, Patrick, I think is the beauty of what you just said is exactly right, is people are waiting on the sidelines, waiting for this massive drop. It's just not going to happen. Look at the data between March 2023 versus March 2024. In every single province, the prices are up except for PEI. And if you look, Saskatchewan, fairly flat, but you look at all the rest of them. I mean, BC, up just over 6%, Alberta up 11%, Manitoba up 7%, Ontario up just under 2%, Quebec 7%, New Brunswick 7%, Nova Scotia up almost 10%, and Newfoundland up 9%. This is year over year prices, Patrick. We're not comparing this, we're comparing this to last year. So in a time where the market gets tighter and tighter and tougher, the prices continue to escalate. And this is what I've been trying to make these. I'm currently in discussion with many counselors in the various municipalities Visture operates in. I'm trying to make them understand this. Guys, the more of this intra-conflict you guys create, and the more of this bureaucracy you put in front of us, and the more of this the only people this is hurting is people who can't afford homes, can't afford to buy a home, can't afford the rent, and this just continues to escalate while they have their head up their ass trying to figure stuff out. It's just not getting better, Patrick. It's getting worse, if anything.
Well, there's a fundamental that we run into, right? When we have bureaucracy and we have government, this is the challenge that we always run into, is that those individuals who are sitting behind the desk making these calls actually have no relatedness to what goes on in reality of being in the market. They're at the effect of it, or they hear about it, months down the road, but they're not in it. Like you are looking at it on a day-to-day in the trenches basis, as many of our investor listeners are. And so they don't relate to what is actually happening. And something I don't want to step over in all of this is that rents continue to rise. And as much as we saw that chart where you showed Saskatchewan being flat, the one thing that Saskatchewan is enjoying because of that is, although appreciation on real estate has not been
big,
guess what? Rents are. So cash flow in Saskatchewan is off the charts. I've talked to a number of investors in that province, same as Manitoba. They got some really strong cash flows happening because rents are continuing. So having said that, they're giving up appreciation, but cash on cash return and cash flow is great.
That's all part of the ROI of real estate, no doubt about that. So let's look at this final chart, Patrick, before we move on to the next topic here. And that is, as the world continues in the direction that we're going, affordability becomes more and more challenging. And I'll give you kudos on this, which is you were 100% accurate. This is 2 times I'm crediting you in the same show, Patrick. I just want you to pay attention to this. But this is... You were absolutely right about affordability and how that was going to be a massive driver going forward. You talked about this right as we entered COVID, as we came out of COVID, and you're 100% right. And affordability is getting more and more and more difficult. Even though the price of real estate in some markets, people think it's gone down. I just showed you charts. It's actually going up. That compounded on top of higher interest rates makes affordability even worse. And that does not help inflation, which we're going to talk about next, Patrick.
Yeah, and I want to just shine a light on a couple of things. Again, we joke about me being right and all the rest of it, and that's great, by the way. And more importantly, around all of it is that it's just to lend credibility to the fact that when we're guiding people, when we're showing and teaching people how to read and look at the economic fundamentals, is that there is a track record that, yes, this stuff really works. Looking at the economic fundamentals, the way we educate, the way we teach, is an effective way of anticipating and looking into the future as investors. I mean, go back 4.5 years, JG, when we were talking about Calgary. I mean, we could not have beat that drum any harder in talking about Alberta, to the degree that you started calling me Mr. Alberta. Well, listen, I'm agnostic. I want to go where the real estate and where I can put money to work and get the best return on my investment. We saw that trend based on the economic fundamentals. So as much as we joke about me being right, it's more important to shine a light on the fact that understanding the economic fundamentals is what gives you the view of the future as a real estate investor. So when we look at affordability, and this almost gets like, how much harder do we need to beat this drum? Rents are not going to go down anytime soon. Yes, you'll see little undulations and nuances, but ultimately the trend is going to go up. And I'll make the call here. Don't know where we want to put this segment, but I think we're going into the world of stagflation. And I think that people need to be prepared for that. And that as investors, we're going to see that. If you like what you learned here, go to the description below and subscribe for our free Insiders newsletter, where you can also stay up to date for our upcoming events and our courses.